Hello and welcome. First off, I just want to thank you for purchasing this children's book illustration pack for Procreate. I really appreciate it, and I am looking forward to doing this tutorial today for you to show you what all is contained in the pack and how to get the most out of it. So starting out, I'm going to assume that you've already downloaded the zip file, and if you have, it's going to be in your Files app. So let's open the Files app here, and for mine, I've got saved in Downloads. Yours is probably in the same place, but if it's not, just look for wherever it's located and saved at. And once you've located it, to unzip it, all we have to do is just tap on that zip file. You don't need a separate app to unzip it. The Files app does the work for you, so that is not necessary to download. So now that we've got it, you see there's a separate folder here that contains the book pack itself. If you're having an issue with the zip file, I know there's been problems in the past. I've had customers reach out to me that say that the zip file itself says that it's password protected or you don't have the authority or permission to open it. I can guarantee you there's nothing wrong with the zip file. For some reason, this is something that happens with the Files app on the iPad. It's just a glitch that happens. So to rectify this, all you have to do, super easy, turn off the iPad, turn it back on. That solves it. I don't know why it happens. I don't know why that fixes it. But if you see that error message come up, guarantee nothing's wrong. All you have to do, turn it off and back on, and you'll get the ability to open up that into that folder. So speaking of that folder, let's go ahead and click on it and see what's contained inside. So there we go. We've got 5 different files here. We've got 4 folders and our brush set. So this here, children's book brush set for Procreate. To load in all 20 brushes at once, all we have to do is just tap on the brush set, importing, and if we just go ahead and tap on one of our canvases here, you'll see it loaded it up here at the top. I already had it in here, so I've got duplicates now, but that's the new one right there. So it is in Procreate and ready to go. So let's go back to our Files app and talk about the rest of these. So the 4 folders that you see here, these contain the Insta-Texture Canvases. So there's a total of 10 different canvases. However, there's technically 40 of them because I have 4 different versions of these. So let's talk about the differences. Here we've got 2 different sets of RGB canvases and 2 different sets of CMYK. So with these, the difference is just in the color profile. So RGB is for Procreate users who mainly use the app to do designs that they're going to post online. RGB is intended for screen use. So if you draw designs and you only post to Instagram or Twitter or to Facebook, that's basically what you're going to want to use for your color profile. However, if you have the CMYK one available and you print, that's the one that you're going to want to use. So if you intend to print out any designs that you've done in the app and you're going to have a physical copy, the CMYK color profile is what you're going to want to go with. Key here is to make the correct decision on which one to choose before you start on your piece, because once you've started, you can't go back and switch. It's locked in, so make the right decision to begin with. And then from there, we've got 2 different versions of each of those. We have regular res and high res. So these are just 2 different canvas sizes. So the high res ones are going to be 4,500 pixels by 5,400 pixels at 300 DPI. And the regular res ones are basically half of that. So 2250 by 2700 at 300 DPI for both the RGB and the CMYK. So the reason why I did 2 different sizes is because of the way that iPads handle layers in Procreate. So the number of available layers that you have in Procreate is going to be determined by what model iPad you have, or more importantly, how much RAM is in your iPad. So the higher amount of RAM you have, the more layers you have available in Procreate. The reason why that's important with these canvases is because each one of these canvases start out already using 4 layers. So the Insta-Texture Canvas, it's made up of 4 layers. Once you open it up, you're already using 4 of whatever your number of available layers are. So if you have an iPad Pro, probably want to go with the high-res ones. If you have an older iPad or a non-Pro model with not as much RAM, you might want to go with the regular res ones. That being said, though, if you don't use a lot of layers, if you're going to do everything all in one layer, you could still get away with using the high-res ones with a regular iPad. So let's look at what's inside here. I'm going to go ahead and open up the high-res one here. And you see we have each of the 10 canvases here. These are all Procreate files. So to get these in Procreate, super easy. All we have to do is just tap, and it's going to import here. It's imported. We go back to our gallery view, and there we go. We've got the canvas right there. But let's say you want to get more than one into Procreate at a time. You don't want to have to worry about tapping on each one of these. You can actually import all of them in one fell swoop. So if we go ahead and pull up our dock here, and then we do split screen here, and then let's go back to gallery. I'm going to go ahead and delete this one, because we're going to move it over again here. All right. So what we need to do here on our Files app side is just hit select. And then if we go and select all of these like so, and then we just hold down and grab any one over here, it's going to pick up all of them at once. Going over here to Procreate, can drag and drop, and then it's going to import them. So with this, of course, I'm dragging the high res ones over here. They're larger file sizes, so they're going to take a little bit longer. But once this is all done importing, you're going to see they come up in the gallery view. So once they do load into gallery, though, they're going to be all stacked separately. So they're just going to be in lines here individually. They're not in any type of folder. So they're going to take up a lot of space there on the screen. And if you've been using Procreate for a while, you might know how to do stacks, but in case you're new to the program or have never used this feature before, I'll show you how you can kind of manage these a little bit better. So if we hold down on the first one here, we'll be able to pick it up and drag it, and then we're going to drag and drop it on top of the one next to it. You see how they're kind of stacked on top of each other. So now if we press this, we've got basically a folder that has two of those in there. So from here, we can go ahead and hit select, and then we can go ahead and select the rest of these. Use my other finger here. Then if we hold down, drag these here, let it open that stack and let go, it's now going to house all 10 of those. It takes up less space. And then we can even go back in here. If you wanted to load in both the RGB and the CMYK ones, you could tap on the stack, and then we can go ahead and change the name of this to, let's see, RGB, maybe if I can do this right, RGB high res. Hit done, and now that one's labeled as high res. Then we could load in the CMYK ones. If you've got a lot of space and you want to load in the regular res ones too, it's totally up to you how you want to do it. But from here, let's go ahead and open up the stack, and let's look at the Insta-Texture Canvases and see what they're made up of. So let's go ahead and tap on burlap here, and you can see pretty much a white canvas, not a lot going on. Doesn't look like there's anything there, but looks can be deceiving because there is more than meets the eye. So if we go up here to our layers menu, you're going to see I've got a blank layer here called Art Goes Here. But then we've got a texture group up here. If we go ahead and expand this texture group, you're going to see there's 4 separate layers that make up the Insta-Texture Canvas. So these are what gives the canvas the texture. They're all separate layers, but they're contained inside the texture group here. The key as you start to create, as you start to make a design is, number one, you want to start drawing on the layer here. If you add more layers in, you want to make sure that the layers always stay below the texture group. The texture group should always be at the top of your layers menu. So let's look and see, what's this do? Why is it white now? What's going to happen once we add color? So let me grab a bright orange here, and I'm just going to grab in one of my brushes, and we're going to start painting, and you're going to see, look at there. We have an instant texture. So this is the burlap coming in a little bit closer. You can see how nice of a texture that is. As I go back up here to the layers menu, if I turn off the texture group, you're going to see exactly what that brush looks like by itself. So there we go. That's the difference between the two. Now, this brush that I'm using, that's part of the pack that you just downloaded, but it's not doing anything special with the actual Insta-Texture Canvases. So that means any brush that you have in Procreate is going to work with these Insta-Textures. So if I go down here just to airbrushing, this is something that everyone has with Procreate, and start to airbrush, you're going to see I also get that exact same texture. Coming back up here to the layers menu, then let's take a little bit closer look at what these do. So dropping down this to expand it, as we turn these on and off, let me zoom in a little bit closer here. You can see the changes that each of these make. So they all come together to form a final texture. However, if there's certain ones that you don't really want, you can always turn those off. Likewise, you have full manual control over the intensity of the effects of that texture layer. So if I go up here to this top one, click the CD here to bring up the blend mode. CD stands for color dodge, and we can adjust the opacity here to change the intensity of the effect of that texture layer. So that gives you the full manual control. If you get done with a design and want to kind of fine tune things at the end, that's how you do it. So let me go ahead then, and I'm going to clear these out, what I just did. So that's what we're left with usually when you open. So this is how you start something from scratch, by grabbing the brushes, by going in here and then adding new layers. But let's say that you already have a piece that you've finished. You've got a piece you've worked on 3 months ago before you bought this pack, and you think, oh, I wish I had that at the time. It could really, really add a lot to my work. Well, you can still add these to an already finished piece. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. So let's go back here to our gallery view, and let me just go ahead and grab this snowman. So this was something that I did for a tutorial on my YouTube channel. If you guys don't follow me over on YouTube, I do a bunch of Procreate tutorials, so feel free to hop on over. It's called Let's Draw with BJ Dell. I'm sure most of you probably already know about it and have found this through that video, but that's where I'm located at if you want more free tutorials. So this one, of course, a little bit different size, but that's okay. We're going to make it work. So if we go up here to our wrench icon and we go over to add, we're going to go down to copy. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We're going to go to copy canvas. So that's going to copy every single layer we have over here. So now we're going to go back to gallery, and let's go back to our Insta-Texture Canvas, and we can just grab any one. Let's do wrinkled paper down here. So it loaded up once again, totally blank. It looks like a plain white canvas until we paste. So back up to our wrench icon, paste, and there we go. Zoom in so you can kind of see all these textures, and then turning them off and on so you can tell the difference here and just how much character that adds to the design just with the click of that button. And once again here, of course, too, you can go in and manually adjust each one, turn one off, turn two off, adjust the intensity of each, totally up to you to get that desired final look. But like I said, this is a different size than the canvas that we're using right now. So do we not want to keep this? Do we not want the white background kind of border there? That's okay. All we have to do is crop it. So if we go up here to our wrench icon and we go to canvas, and then we go to crop and resize, we can pull in the corners here to crop it, or we can go into settings. And I know this one was a 4000 by 4000. So we can just go ahead and enter in the 4000 by 4000. I didn't want to hit done though. I got a little ahead of myself. Do that one more time here because we need to move it around then. So crop and resize, settings 4000 by 4000, done. Now it's going to add that cropped box there, and we just need to get it set in around our design, hit done, and it's going to crop it, and then we're left with that 4000 by 4000. You might want to zoom in a little bit more to make sure you've got it right on the edges and use snapping and magnetic to do that. because I kind of missed right up there at the top, got a little bit of white there, but that's okay. It gives you the idea. So you can definitely use these with designs that you've already finished previously, and it opens up a world of possibilities to art that you've already got done in your gallery. So now that we've talked about that, let's go ahead and actually do a design from scratch. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead and use the watercolor canvas. So once again, a white canvas here, and I do have my brushes already loaded in there, ready to go. My color palette here, I've got this pre-made, so if you want to follow along with the exact same colors that I'm using in this tutorial, there's actually a link to this color palette in the README file where you found the link for this video at. It's a Google Drive link that you can just download this color palette. If you're not sure about how to install swatches or color palettes in Procreate, I do have a tutorial video specifically on that. If you go to my website, bjdell.com, underneath the YouTube reference materials page at the very top, you'll see a video that outlines the process of how to load in the color palette. So really want to kind of just show you from the ground up how to do a design, what all these brushes do, how to use them the most effectively, and kind of give you some pointers along the way. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to my color palette, and I'm going to go to this brown here. So my idea for this design, really basic, just a classic children's book illustration look of just a bear in the woods, just a cute bear in the woods, maybe have some grass and some trees, super basic, but it's going to show you just really how much the Insta-Texture does, number one, and then how much you can get just by using these brushes in combination with that. Also, feel free if you want to use these brushes in combination with any other pre-installed brushes with Procreate or any other ones that you've downloaded from other creators, definitely use those in tandem with the other ones. So let's go ahead and start out. I'm going to use the rough edge painter to begin with, and I'm going to turn Streamline on here under the Brush Studio. And this is what I use just to fill in like a major solid area, is the rough edge painter. So with that locked in, I'm going to go ahead and make a circle for the head here, holding down with one finger and then the other finger to lock in a circle. Drag and drop the color in. You can see right off the bat, boom, we've got a watercolor texture. Turning it off, this is what that brush looks like. Turning it on, there we go. We've got the paper texture that you can kind of see here, and then we've got those splotches of that traditional watercolor as well. So that's going to be the head. I'm going to kind of play around with the shape here. I'm going to maybe move it down a little bit towards the bottom, and then I'm going to warp it a tad bit too here to make it a little bit more interesting so it's not a perfect circle there. Kind of flattened out here at the bottom of the chin and the bottom of the jaw. All right, so there we go. We've got the head for the bear. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and come up to my layers menu here. I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer, and this will be for the ear. So once again, I'm going to draw another circle, holding down to lock it in, drag and drop the color there. So I've got a left ear. Let's go ahead, go back up to our layers menu, and I'm going to slide this one to the left to duplicate it. Then coming up to my arrow here, click that, and I'm going to flip this horizontally, switch over to freeform, and just drag this off to the side there. Looks a little off-centered, so if I swipe all these to the right, I can select multiples at once. We'll just drag it there towards the center. We get that orange line. It lets us know that's the center. So there we go. That is locked in. Next up, let's go ahead and merge these ears together. So I'm going to tap the top one here, and I'm going to merge down. Then I'm going to go ahead and do a body here underneath. So on the same ears layer here, going back to my brush, the rough edge painter, I'm just going to pull in a body here at the bottom. We'll fill that in. And I like this rough edge painter just because it does have, believe it or not, a rough edge. That's why I named it that, but it has that just kind of messy feel to it. It's not too perfect. It has a very traditional hand-drawn look, and I really like that. So that's why I went that route. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead and get the inside of the ears done. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and let's see. Let's go ahead and make a new layer here. And coming up to my color palette, the third one here on the top, got this kind of lighter color. Go ahead and use that. And I'm going to make a circle once again. Drag and drop the color in there. I'll warp it just a little bit so it's not perfect. Let's get it to where it looks pretty good there. And then I'm going to go ahead and slide this one to the left. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to grab that, flip it horizontally. Using freeform then, dragging it over to the side there. All right. Now to make all that stuff disappear behind the head here, I'm going to go ahead and grab the head, move that all the way to the top there. So now that stuff is going to sit behind there, and we can go ahead and merge these layers together. So you can pinch, or you can just go ahead and click and merge down. Let's go ahead and do a belly color down here on that same layer of the inside of the ears. I'll just drag around that there. And we've got the basic shape for a bear. I think it's looking pretty cute. So let's work on the face next. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my layers here. Coming to the face shape here, the head shape, I'm going to make a new layer on top of there. Color palette, I'm going to use this dark brown, the second color on the top row. And then for the brush, I'm going to use my illustration liner for this one. And we're just going to draw in some eyes here. Get a left eye here. Get a right eye in over here. And then let's go ahead and do nose here. Pull that down. Now, if you don't like it, of course, you can go in just with the eraser. I'm going to use my same brush here, that illustration liner. I'm going to kind of pull in here a little bit tighter so I can get a better view of this. I was zoomed out a little bit too far. I'm going to try that one more time here. There we go. We got a cute little button nose in there. Just kind of building up the strokes as I go. And then dropping the size of this, I'm going to pull down just a little bit of a mouth here. Nothing too fancy. Just, like I said, really basic is what I'm going for with this design. All right, so there we go. Now, one thing as I'm looking at this, I see this has a really huge patch of color here that's kind of hiding that eye, and I'm not super huge on how that looks right now. So I'm going to come up in here to the layers menu. I'm going to go to the texture group, and I'm going to try to find which one is causing that color to look like that. So it looks like a combination between actually all three of these. So if I play around with this a little bit, can change this and get a little bit better separation there. I think that's a little bit better. And then I could also come in too with an eraser and erase a little bit if I wanted to, but I'm going to leave it there for now. I think that looks actually pretty decent. So there we go. We've got the face of the bear. I'm going to grab now, once again, coming here to the eyes layer. I'm going to grab this lighter color that we use for the inside of the ears, using that same illustration liner. I'm just going to add in a couple of highlights here, the nose, and then on this eye as well. So we've got those. That looks good. I like it. One thing I want to point out before we get any further with the brushes, a lot of these are going to work like your normal brush. So illustration liner just follows your basic stroke. Same thing with the painter that we used. However, things change a little bit once you get further down. Tree leaf and plant leaf work a little bit different, but we'll talk about that later. What I really want to kind of draw attention to is two different types of brushes. We have these three here, which I labeled as tap, and then the name of the brush. So we have tap crosshatch, tap dot texture, tap messy dot shader highlighter. So the reason why I label these tap is because they do not follow your regular stroke path. So if you see here, as I draw, nothing's happening. It just does the first time that I tap on the screen there. Nothing happens past that. So to build up these textures on tap, you'll just tap over and over again to get that texture build up. That works with the crosshatch, the dot texture, and that messy dot shader highlighter. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing that I want to bring up before we get too far is these set of brushes down here that have the name of the brush followed by grain scale. So if you've used Procreate before, I'm sure that you're aware that you can change the size of a brush using the slider up here. Further up makes it bigger, further down makes it smaller. These brushes with the grain scale do not work like that. That's why they're labeled a little bit different. So with grain scale, let's go ahead and just grab these vertical hatches here. The actual brush size, that is changing the shape of the brush. So the shape is actually getting bigger. With these little markings in here, that's not the shape of the brush, that's actually the grain of the brush. So to make those marks bigger, what we need to do is go into our brush library here, tap on the brush that we want to change, and then once the Brush Studio comes open, we want to go to grain, and you'll see there's the scale setting here. If we slide this, that is what makes the brush bigger. This is not actually affecting those strokes inside there. So keep that in mind. If you see grain scale, that's not going to do anything. You want to come in here to the actual Brush Studio and change it that way, because to get these brushes to work right, to get the desired effect, I had to make them using the grain, and that's going to be the difference between those and normal brushes. So we'll talk more about that later once we get further into using those. So let's go ahead and add in a little bit more details to this guy's face. Let's go ahead and go to, let's see. Let's go ahead and go to our head or face layer here, and I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. I'm going to come up to my color palette. I'm going to choose that same color that we used for the inside of the ears and the belly. And for this, I'm going to use the Wet Wash watercolor, and we're just going to color in around his snout here. So that gives the watercolor effect around there, and it makes it a little bit more subdued rather than those messy lines and the outlines that we used before. So we've got that. Let's go ahead and do the same thing to the cheeks. Go into the color palette. I've got this pink color here, so we'll add in a little rosiness here to the cheeks underneath the eyes. Get those in there, and I think that looks good. So there we go. Now let's work on kind of building up some shadows and some highlights. So to do this, once again, let's go ahead and let's make a new layer here on top of the head. And we're going to go ahead and set this to clipping mask. So anything that we draw on this layer is only going to show up on parts that overlap this layer. So if we draw outside here, it's not going to show up because there's nothing colored on this layer outside there. So coming back up here to our color palette, then we're going to use this darker color that we used for the eyes and the nose. And then I'm going to come back up here to my brush library, and I'm going to use the tap crosshatch. So once again, to use this, we have to tap. I'm going to kind of zoom in here so we can see a little bit better. Once again, this does affect the size because it's not labeled as a grain scale. So if it's not labeled as a grain scale, you can change the size by going up there and adjusting the brush size. So that makes it change pretty quick. We're going to do the same thing here for the bottom part of the body. So if we go down here where the body layer is, we're We're going to make a new layer again, and we're going to set this as clipping mask as well. We're going to add in some cross hatching down there. That's going to kind of help build that up. We can bring in some cross hatching here around as well underneath the ears. And then I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the color for the belly here. And we'll add in a little cross hatching here as it starts to come up. Also here on the side and down the side of the head, which we need to switch back to the clipping mask layer of the head. So there we go. We've got a little bit of texture going on now. It's looking pretty good. Next up, let's go ahead and go back to our darker color here. And let's go back down to this layer 12 that's clipped to the body. We're going to try to get that head to stand out a little bit more by darkening this up down here. So with that darker color selected, we're going to go back up here and we're going to use the wet wash watercolor. And we're just going to darken this up underneath here. Need to get the opacity a little bit higher there. And then I was not on the right layer though. So you see how it was going outside? It's because I was on the actual layer 7. So I want to go up to that one. If you think you're on the right layer and you know that something is set as clipping mask and you start going outside, it's a pretty telltale sign that you're on the wrong layer. So there we go. Now let's go ahead and add in a few more textures here. So doing this, let's go back up here to, we can use this layer 11 that we did the cross hatching on. So this is going to be attached to the head layer. And I'm going to go ahead and grab a different brush here. So let's use one of these grain scales. And for this one, I think I'm going to go ahead and use the vertical hatches. Need to see size-wise, it's going to be way too big. So once again, tapping on this to go into the brush studio, grain selected and dropping this down. I think maybe about 10% might do it. And then I'm just going to start to build this up around the top. So there we go. I've got the start of a texture up there, but I'm going to change it a little bit because I don't want it to be so dark, number one. So I'm going to grab my eraser now, and I'm going to use the wet wash watercolor for this to start to kind of fade this up. Make this bigger and kind of knock it all out at the top here so it's not as dark. And then I'm going to fade it down so it's kind of blends in as it goes down. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my lighter color there that we did the ears with. And let's see, let's go ahead and use, I'm trying to think which other one I want to do. Let's go ahead and use the, let's go ahead and use the dash pattern. I think that one will look okay. So we use the dash pattern here. We can go around the top of the nose here. Add that in. Once again, going back in with the eraser and the watercolor. Making the size a little bit smaller. Just going to kind of pull that out a little bit. So it's just the hint of that in there. Try to basically make it move in a kind of crescent moon shape around there. It's just kind of finding the right size and then the right pressure. All right, there we go. I don't want it too pronounced. I want it to kind of blend in. You don't want to automatically be drawn there to see it. So I think that does the job pretty well there. Next up, let's go ahead and work on the ears then. So layer 7, actually we can use layer 12. This is the clipping mask layer. We're going to stick with that same color, but we're going to come up here to our brush library again. And with this one, let's see. Which one do I want to use? Let's go ahead and use that same dash pattern on top for these. I think that'll look good across the top of the ear, kind of for some highlights there. And then we can come back in then with the watercolor to kind of fade them out a little bit. All right, there we go. So we got a lot of textures in there. I like the look of those. And we can also add some textures here down to the body. So if we come in here, I'm going to go to, let's use the lighter color again. And for this one, let's go ahead and use the fur tapers. And just really lightly kind of adding in some of those fur tapers down on the body. Once again, going back in with the watercolor wash, we can kind of pull them out just a little bit. So we just kind of have the hint that they're down there. So I think that looks good. Once again, just a ton of textures going on here. We haven't done a lot of them by hand. A bunch of this is just happening because of that Insta-Texture. But I like the looks of these little hatches and stuff. Once again, just a traditional children's book illustration technique that's been around for years and years, and you constantly see it in a lot of different illustration styles like that. So let's go ahead now and let's go to the insides of the ears here and do some work on those. So if we go ahead and let's just set these as alpha lock so we can just color directly on there. And then for here, I think I'm going to go ahead and let's use one of the shader highlighters. So let's go ahead and use the textured shader. And we need to switch our color here. I think of this, I'm going to use that same pink rosy color that we used for the cheeks. And I'm just going to do this really light. Kind of pull that down towards the center. Once again here, really light. I'm barely touching the screen right now and just kind of building it up as I go. And I'm going to bring that home just a little bit more here by changing the color to this brown kind of, I don't know, orangish brown above that light green there. And we're going to hit the edges of this just a little bit to bring that out even more. There's that. We'll bring it around here at the top too. All right, so we'll pull back out and see what we're left with. There we go. Really, really cute. I like how it's turning out so far. So that's going to be our basic bear design. I think maybe doing a little bit of something here with the muzzle, the nose. So if I come back to layer 10, that's what that is on. And coming back up here to my brush set, and I think we'll use the nozzle spray here. Just kind of add in just a little bit of texture there around. And we can do the same thing as well down on the belly, just to add in a little bit of texture down there. I'm going to drop the opacity though down there. I don't want it too dark. There we go. So there is our bear. I like it. He's cute. Next up, let's go ahead and work on adding a background now. So I'm going to come up here to my color palette and let's just use the first green here. Since we're drawing a fairly big shape, once again, I'm going to come up here to that rough edge painter, use that to kind of draw this around. So I think maybe just drawing like a hill. So I need to make a new layer though. So we need to come back up to our layers menu, make a new layer. We're going to drag this down below. Getting quite a few layers in here too. So I'm going to collapse that texture group so we can see everything a little bit easier. And I'm just going to drag around just a section of green like so. All right, so we've got the hill behind him. Let's go ahead and add to that now. So if I make another new layer here and drag and drop this down below layer 13. If you're running out of layers, if you decide to hop in with a high-res canvas and not an iPad Pro, feel free to merge some of these that we're done with. It's totally up to you if you want to save some space. Or if you didn't use the high res and you have the older iPads or a non-pro, hopefully you just went with the regular res. So now that we've got this layer 14 back here, let's go back up to our color palette, choose this darker green here. And for this, let's go ahead and let's use the ground texture. So this is another one that follows the stroke. It also is size adjustable, and you can kind of build it up as you go. We'll just add this in here just for some extra textures. We can go bigger here in the back and add some other ones as well. Go up further. However you want to do it, it's totally up to you. Make it your own. So there we go. We've got that added in there. Let's go ahead now and maybe add some grass down here. So we come back up to my layers, go to that layer 13 of the hill, coming back up to my brush library and grass down here. Once again, this is a grain scale one, so if it's too big, actually that looks pretty good. You can change it by going into your brush studio, grain, and changing the scale. This one, once again, follows your stroke, so you can create them just by drawing, or you can also tap and it will create as well. So we'll just get some grass in there. And then how about we add like a little plant or bush down here in this section. So to do this, we can come back up here to the brush library and we've got plant leaf for this. Now this is a one tap and it's done type of thing. So to build this up, we just need to tap over and over again. You can draw with this if you want, but to build these up and to make a design or shape out of them, you'll have to tap. The cool thing about this though is it actually follows the direction of the canvas. So as you turn the canvas, the actual shape turns as well. Also, depending on how hard you press, it will adjust the size. So smaller, pressing harder gives you a bigger leaf there. So let's go ahead and add this in. Maybe here. Oops. Get a little bit smaller here. And we'll just kind of build these up and around. Like I said, just turning the canvas is going to change the size or the direction. And then how hard you tap is going to change the size. It might take you a few times of turning the canvas to get it to go exactly where you want it to, but it does save you from just doing one and then having to copy and paste it over and over again and use the transform tool to get it to change direction. So I do find this is going to be quite a bit quicker for you in the long run. It looks like I missed some grass there or some hill there, so I'm going to have to change that. That one was a little bit too big. All right, so there we go. We got a little bush there, a little plant kind of off to the side. I'm going to go back and fill that grass in that I missed there at the bottom. Grabbing that rough edge painter again. There we go. All right, so that bottom's done. I think that looks pretty good. What else can we add? Let's go ahead and do a tree behind him. I just want to try to add enough stuff in here to where I can show you the majority, or not the majority, but every single brush. So we're going to use every single brush. Don't feel like you have to do it on your designs. Sometimes that's going to be overkill if you try to use all 20 brushes. Just find what works for your design, what works for you as a creator, and go from there. So let's see. Once again, rough edge painter, that's what we're going to use for this. And color, the top row far right, I think that'll work for the tree. And then we need to make a new layer down here. We'll drag this down to the bottom. And if you want to, from here, you could also combine these. I think we're pretty much done with the background there. And then we'll just draw a tree here coming up the side. I don't want it to really overlap the head too much. having two browns kind of close to each other there. So we'll do it like that, and then maybe have the branch come out from there. Kind of over top of his head there. And maybe one more up here for good measure. All right, so there we go. We've got our tree. Now we can add some texture to that, as my iPad nearly is dead. So hopefully we'll get this finished. Should have charged it beforehand. All right, so with the tree then, let's go ahead and make a new layer here. And I'm going to set this to clipping mask as well. And then for my color, let's go ahead and use that light brown that we use for the ears. And for this one, let's go ahead and use engraving lines. And this one, the direction is going to follow your stroke, so you can actually make these kind of match up with the direction that the tree is kind of going. So I'm just doing these really light to add in the lines here. As these come up here then, I'm going to start to curve the line around. So you got a nice texture there, kind of has that bark feel to it. Then from here, we can go back in with a darker color. So if I go ahead and do that dark black or dark brown that we use for the eyes, we could pull in some extra ones down here. I think that's a little too dark though. So maybe if I go with that brown instead, let's see what that looks like. That looks a little better there. So we can kind of build this up to where it's got shadows and highlights there of the bark. Just some fun textures coming in from there. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and add some leaves to this. So let's go ahead and go to our brush library again and plant leaf right here. This will allow us to do the leaves. And then, of course, color-wise, we want to go back here and let's use this green right here, the third one over. It's going to work a lot like the plant one that we did down there. Once again, it's going to come and do these on a new layer because this is clipping masked. So let's make a new layer here. I'm going to combine these as well since we're done with the tree there. And then I'm just going to draw or tap to create these leaves as they go around this branch. Once again, it might take a few times to get it the right size and the right angle. So feel free to kind of try it over and over again if you need to. I know some people maybe with motion sickness right now are yelling at me because I'm zooming and twisting quite a bit. So I do apologize for that, but one of those necessary evils with how this brush works. These coming in, not really touching each other, and then also not really touching the tree. This is kind of one of those classic children's book illustration techniques that you see quite a bit. And finally get this one done here. All right, there we go. Maybe pull in a couple here off to the side too, where you can't actually see the branch coming out. There's a fuller part of the tree up there that you can't really see. All right, there we go. I think that looks pretty good. Now we can kind of make these pop a little bit more by adding some highlights to those. So if we go back into our colors and we choose this brighter green here, we can set this as alpha lock. We can just color directly on here now. And let's go back up and use something we haven't used yet. We used the texture shader, I think, down in here for the ears, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go ahead and use the sloppy shader. Drop the size of this just a little bit here. There we go. This is just going to kind of make these pop a little bit more, give them a little bit more three-dimensional quality. And once again with this, for the shading, I usually go back in, so I add either shading or highlights, and then I'll pull out a little bit of the shading and highlights by going back in with that color that I originally had here, and then going back up inside of there to add even more texture. So you get texture coming, you get texture going. It kind of does double duty with that, and you can kind of get some cooler effects just by going back and forth and building up and removing and building up and removing. I'll go back in now and add that in. Of course, you don't want to get too much. And the size of this, of course, here you'll see the shape of that brush is going to really affect how that looks and what kind of texture you get. So there we go. I think the tree needs a little bit more as far as the shadows to it. So if we go in here and let's go ahead and make a new layer. I'm going to set this to clipping mask. And then probably that darker brown here, the brighter darker brown, using that same sloppy shader. Just want to hit the bottom of the tree limbs. Same thing here as it comes back around. Get the bottom down here. And we'll get a little bit here at the bottom too, where it's coming up behind the grass and off to the side there. So there we go. All right. I think that looks pretty good. If you want to throw in some highlights there too, you could use that same color that we use for the ears and just kind of hit the edges of the tree. Of course, we've got to make this smaller because I just want to kind of do a rim highlight here. So if we hit those like this, you can add in some highlights there. Once again, just makes that look a little bit more three-dimensional, gives it a little bit more character and style to it as well. So there we go. Okay, let's go ahead and add in, oh, we got the highlights back here I forgot about on the other leaves. Can't forget those. Hit those real quick. Just get these in there with that brighter color. And once again, going back in then, pulling away with that same green. So we add and then we subtract. And we get kind of overlapping textures there. And don't get too stuck on a brush size as you move around. Change them up, you know, go bigger, go smaller, depending on the look and the effect that you're wanting to get. So next up, let's go ahead and do the rest of the background here. So if I go ahead and come down to the bottom, make a new layer, drag this all the way underneath here. And let's go with this blue here on the bottom row. Drag and drop that in. And now you can see once again just how much texture you get from that. There's a lot of stuff going on here, and that just really popped and kind of started to bring home the entire design just by adding that in. So that shows you the power of the Insta-Texture Canvas. So let's look at see what else we need to use. We've used the liner, the rough edge painter, all these we've used. Dot texture, so we need to use that one and this one. Let's use the messy lines next. So for this, we can add some textures to the background. Let's go ahead and use white for this. And I'm going to make a new layer again here on top of that blue. And just kind of pull down some textures here. This almost kind of has the feeling of rain to it, I think. And I'm going going to pull this on top of the tree so it's actually going in front of the tree. There we go. Yeah, it kind of has that raindrop feel to it. I think that looks kind of cool. Maybe he's just out here in the forest getting absolutely soaked. And this is another one that goes with the direction of the canvas. So it will not follow the stroke. It's just going to do those lines repeatedly. If you need to change directions, change the canvas direction. Adjust the opacity a little bit to get some lighter and darker areas in there. I think that looks pretty cool. But of course here, if this creates another problem, if we're doing rain, it's going to be hitting the bear. So obviously we need to show that. So let's see if we can find something to do with that. Actually, we haven't even used it yet, but I think the messy dot shader highlighter might work. This is not what I intended this for, but I think that's going to work. Before I get to that, let me show you how I intended to use this first, because I want to show you, the most that you can get out of these. So let me kick back to gallery. We're going to come back to this guy real quick. And this broccoli here, this was the original intentions for that messy, where'd it go? Where did you go? Messy dot. There we go. The messy dot shader highlighter. That was how I achieved this effect here to get these highlights, the midtones, and the shadows. So just to show you that real quick, I'm going to go ahead and select that color here of the broccoli top. I'm going to turn these off real quick and make a new layer. Since I want to fill in something fast, I just want to do that rough edge painter here. We'll just do the broccoli real fast. All right, so now we've got that filled in. The messy edge, one up here for, let's go darker color first. So for the shadows, using that messy dot, once again, you can change the size of this with the slider here. You just set this to alpha lock. Just tapping here and building this up. And once again, like I just talked about then, combining and pulling away now, going back to this base green, and then tapping to remove. So we've got some of it coming into that base green. We've got some of it now pulling out of that. So you see it gives that really cool effect there. And then we can do the same thing then with the highlights here at the top. We just build these up and around. And then once again, switch to the base green and pull them back out. So we've got some coming down in, we've got some coming back into the highlight. So that's that technique. I wanted to talk to you about that and show you that first, because we're not going to use that in the next step, because I thought of a different way to use that with the raindrops. So I just wanted to kind of show you that first, how I intended to use that brush. Which brings up an interesting point too. Sometimes you can use a brush in a totally different way than what it was intended when it was first created. So we'll see if this actually works here. So messy dot shader highlighter. Let's see if we can make this look like there's rain popping off of him. And I think it's doing the job. I'm going to actually do this on a separate layer though. So once again, I think I'm going to come back in here and remove as well. So we got these splashes of rain. Maybe that's why he's got the look on his face too. He's not too happy that he's getting soaked. Some of these are coming up a little bit far, but that's okay, because like I said, I'm going to come back in here now with the eraser, and I'm going to go to that messy dot, and I'm going to tap to remove. Just got to get the right size. So there we go. As I start to tap, some of those are going to get removed. It's going to bring that down a little bit. It's not going to be as high, and it's going to give an even more, I guess, realistic feel to that. Drives home the point a little bit more and gets that exact look that we were going for that I didn't intend on. So there we go. And then from here, we could probably even do more splashes, which will give us another brush that we can use. So if we use the tap dot texture, we can get some little splashes coming off there too. Some finer ones there. And going even further, if we go back to the illustration liner, now I'm just going crazy with this. It wasn't going to be a super, super long drawn out tutorial, but that's kind of what it's turning into. We can do little line splashes like this. There we go. So that looks cool. And I think, of course, then the tree's going to get hit too. So we got to kind of do the same thing to the tree as well. Let's pull this down behind the tree then. And then go back in with the messy dot shader. Kind of pull this along the tree limb. I have to get a lot smaller here towards the top because it's going to be too big. And of course it's going down here, but that's okay because we're going to come back in there with the eraser and we can just hit all that underside and start to remove that top because we want this to be quite a bit thinner here. There we go. Looking good. And then of course add in some of those splashes again with the dot texture. I think this one needs to be a little bit smaller though this time. There we go. We can also hit using the messy dot, we can hit the leaves just a little bit. These are going to be fairly small though. We're not going to go crazy with these. Just a little bit here and there. And then going back in with the eraser to kind of clean up some of the bottom, a little bit of the top. And then a few more over here. Very cool. I like it. All right. So there we go. Let's see what else we've got that we haven't used. I think that's almost everything. Check, 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 check. Oval textured pattern. We haven't used that one yet. Let's just use that in the background. Not that we really need to. This is where I probably wouldn't use this. Once again, don't need to use all 20 brushes every time. But just to show you how this one works, I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. And I'm not sure size-wise. That's actually a pretty decent size. Just throw in some of these back here behind. They're bigger than raindrops, but it still kind of gives that wet look to it, just the pattern. And then from here, I'm going to hit the N for blend mode, drop the opacity of these, and then come back in with the eraser using the wet wash watercolor. Just kind of fade them up a little bit more. There we go. So we've got them. It's really subdued. It's not crazy. It's not drawing your eye directly to them. So I think that actually works pretty well. I think that's good. And let's see what else. I think there's maybe one more. Yeah, so I was looking through dust and scratches. So with this, really, really slight texture. As you can see, it's so slight it doesn't even show up on the actual thumbnail there. So if we zoom in here, you can see what this does. I'll go ahead and just use white for this as well. And make sure we're on a new layer here. So let's go behind everything, just on top of that blue. And you can see we've got some of it showing up there. It's going to show up better if we go darker, just the way that this texture canvas is set up, the Insta-Texture. So if we go with the darker blue there, now you can start to see that kind of pop in there. And this is one that you can adjust size-wise with the grain scale. It will not adjust with the slider over there. So keep that in mind. Always look and see. All right, so there we go. And I think, 5% just in time. I think that's everything. Oh my goodness, it is. So yes, we are finished. There we go, a full tutorial on how to use the newest Procreate pack. Appreciate you guys once again making the purchase. Really means the world to me, and I had a lot of fun doing this tutorial. If you happen to do a design using this pack, definitely tag me. If you're on Instagram or Twitter, you can tag me at BJDell. Or if you're on Facebook and want to show it off on there, I do have a group over there called Keep Creating, a group for artists, by artists, a place where you can share your artwork, give feedback, get feedback, meet new people. It's an awesome place to be, and definitely want you guys to hop on over if you want to. It's easy to find, and you can find it on Facebook. So that is it for this. One final thing before we go. Once again, the Insta-Textures. Once you get to this point, you can go in and actually go and fine tune everything from there. You can turn things off and on. It's totally up to you, and you can take the full manual control. I didn't want to forget that before I signed off here. So play around with it. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. And that is it for this massive tutorial. If you're still watching, thanks for hanging in. Really appreciate it. And until next time, keep creating.